Well, hello world. I'm just some guy on the internet. I'm on the East Coast. I'm Darcy.
I'm on the West Coast, though I'm not. It's not really the coast, I suppose, but I'm from Calgary, and I'm Marcus, and I'm the other guy on the internet.
Cool. And there's a lot of internet material being made by a lot of people.
Hmm.
Uh, and we're all putting it out there, trying to be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just discussing off camera the technical stuff that is required by YouTube. And I find this really interesting that there was a time when a really high level of quality, high level HD and all that was really attractive, and people would put in these really great openings. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Here's our channel. Um, I think that's starting to fade away now. I think the audience now wants longer formats. And that being said, there's a more of an understanding out there that given a long format, we have to make sacrifices in terms of the HD-ness or the sometimes the level, the sound quality as well. I was just compressing a video that was 40 minutes long, and I'm like, man, how do I get this from full quality to something that is going to go to YouTube without too many headaches? So, we're going from 40 gigs down to 6.5. And then can I get it any further than 6.5? And I'm like, and this is right before we're going live. I'm like, oh, come on. I got two programs running. Like, that's a rookie mistake. Two programs running. Well, one's trying to compress. I'm like,
Oh man.
anyways, there's where I am today. I made it just in time and was able to close out of those programs, even though the spinning wheel of death was threatening.
The spinning wheel of death.
Oh, God.
I'm in a similar position. I have clients on Saturdays, and I just finished one from 9 to 10, and I knew it was gonna kind of be like this, but I was like, because I think you're right. People aren't necessarily, they don't really care too much about the swoosh swoosh things and the fancy things anymore. And so I was like, okay, I'm just, frequency, seeing your face more often, hearing who you are and what you're about and what you have to offer is more important. And I think that's awesome. And the other thing that I was thinking about was that I think there's actually a really big interest in people who like to know what happens behind the scenes. Instead of all
Definitely.
this swish, swish, whoosh, whoosh, they want to know, they want to be the fly on the wall that looks into the producer's studio and sees all the cool stuff that's going on and see that they're just real people, or that they're reading from a teleprompter, or that they are doing it live and unscripted. That's why I love those raw conversations like Joe Rogan. We've mentioned him a couple times, and those types of formats.
Absolutely. Because I think we all realize everyone has the opportunity to participate in this kind of a forum. And it really doesn't take much to get involved. The barrier for entry is quite low. And over the years, I'm just simply not really all that impressed anymore by someone who's able to spend a lot of money to throw into their YouTube content. If what they're talking about is not interesting, it's not interesting. You can't make it look any better. You can't make it sound any better. If it's not interesting, it's not interesting.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people, like, we have a couple of fans already who
Oh,
are leaving some comments, and they say they're listening more so than they're watching, uh, and that they miss some parts, partly because they're multitasking. And everyone does that. I do that all the time. I was listening to Joe Rogan yesterday with Elon Musk, and I realized, yeah, there's parts that I miss because not only am I doing a few little cleaning duties here and there, as the time goes by. But I also speed it up to like, normal and a half or something like that,
Mm,
so that it's only, an hour and 20 minutes rather than 2 hours. And then I'm like, oh, I missed that part, but I can go back.
yeah, totally. Yeah, speeding up to 1.5. I think that's a thing that people, I forget who I learned it from, but it's that gained time or extra time that you gain. Now you can learn, download information quicker, and complete other tasks and save time at the same
Hmm.
time.
Where I first encountered it was one of my favorite YouTubers who taught me how to play poker. His simple suggestion was, uh, if you've watched a lot of my videos and you're getting used to the types of things that I talk about often, just speed up the video. And I
Mm,
was like, wow. So actually, I could go back to a lot of his basic videos that were like 30, 40 minutes long, and they're just a refresher course, and just put it on double speed.
yeah.
And you're just going through it really quickly. And he said, well, if you're a beginner, you can actually consider the opposite and slow it down. Make sure you understand exactly each concept that I'm talking about. And I was like,
Mm.
brilliant.
On the topic of learning, I got a question for you because uh, I I've been really learning a lot through audiobooks and of course, YouTube channel, YouTube videos and stuff like that as well. But through audiobooks and podcasts and things like that. But what I've felt like I've been missing is using reading actual books, and I'm trying to get better at that. But I was wondering, like we talked about in one of the last videos, we talked about how it's important to learn about different political, the history of political ideologies, of ideas and different things like that. And I was wondering if there's a better way to either ingest that information or faster way, or if reading is the preferred method, and it's better for you. And is there a better way to bring reading into your daily habits and your daily programs where it's actually enjoyable and you can, yeah.
I'm not an expert on that. I couldn't say if reading is better than taking in a lot of information via sped up podcasts or whatever, because you can take in a lot of information. Whether one is better than the other, I don't know. The jury's still out on that. I kind of think that no, it's not that it's a matter of being better than the other. It's a matter of the organization of the ideas can be different. If you look back to, say, the 1800s in the United States is a great example. You look at some of the political debates of the time. Remember, there was no radio, no television. You would actually gather in a community hall or a church or something like that, and the political candidates would have the stage and the base essentially for the entire day. And debates could go on for 4, 6, 8, 10 hours. These
Mm,
were long, in-depth, very poetic type language that was used. The rhetoric was extremely well versed and literate. And a lot of us think, oh, in those times, that society was less literate. Well, yes, that's partly true, but it's also partly false. Because, yes, there was a lower level across the board of education. You would find more poor folk who didn't know how to read. However, their skills at listening to orators, you can give them that term, an orator, someone who speaks for a long time, that skill was in tune. And you look at some of the texts from those days, the thought is quite complex. You can jump back a little bit further to the time of Shakespeare, and you think, well, the average student in high school is like, oh my God, this fucking Shakespeare shit is crazy. However, the general, essentially illiterate populace would come out to these shows and know what they're talking about, and they loved it. So and
Mm.
there was an oral tradition that sort of drifted away, and then the on the page organization of thought was a new sort of generation, and now we're moving into a whole new sort of framing or way to organize those thoughts,
Hmm.
and I think it does change the way that you go about your argument. And of course, there's always the people, ooh, I fear the future because everything is now in shorter sound bites, and you need to essentially wound your opponent, and everything is a debate, nothing is search for the truth. You just want to be the winner, and so you'll bring out any um, tactic to make oneself a winner, including, of course, smearing people and insulting and calling them names, etc. And that's unfortunately, in particular, where American politics has ground itself down to this insult level, and those are the skills of the people that are successful in this. They're most successful at being socialites. They're able to socialize with people who have money and get political donations and smear and attack their opponents for the rest of the public to go, goddamn Hillary, lock her up, lock her up. We've simplified our criticism of Hillary to 3 syllables. Lock her up. Wow,
Mm.
that's in a way brilliant. You've distilled and compressed that thought into 3 syllables.
Mm-hmm. Man, yeah. Well, I was thinking about what you said about how we think everything has to be in sound bites and everything has to be go 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 type of thing, sort of combative and that sort of thing. And as you were saying that, because I want to get better at doing interview style conversations, right immediately right before you were saying that, I was like, okay, I need to practice having something to say immediately after so that I can keep it quick. And then I was like, but I don't have anything. I kind of just want to sit with the idea and think about it. And so maybe I don't have to.
Sure.
Maybe I can sit.
There are no particular rules to having a good conversation. There perhaps are guidelines to having more effective conversations. And the guidelines I find are always rooted in listening.
Mm.
If I'm trying to actually uh, find a connection with the person I'm conversing with, um, then I need to frame it in what they're talking about. Now, even just in a short example, in what I just said, I hear the sound that you said and the little nod of the head, and I include that as part of the listening. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, he's following what I'm saying, therefore, I can continue with that train of thought, and it will probably be more effective. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to be really good at what I'm doing, then I will try and find where the end point is and try and find the point where I let go of what I'm trying to say and give the opportunity back to the other person. So, and that essentially means, when do I wrap it up and ask the person a question based on what I just said?
Mm.
How do they feel about it? And do they have anything to add to that? Um, and of course, right now I am asking you that, if you have anything to add.
um, yeah. uh, well, I'll say one thing that sprouted from my mind as we were talking about this, because I was thinking, well, there can be different conversations based on your personality type too, or your different personality temperament. Whether you're high in openness or high in neuroticism or low in agreeableness, for example. And I found, like, if you have two people that are low in agreeableness, um,
Good
they're
example.
very assertive. They want to make sure their point is heard, and they might disagree with the points frequently. And those types of conversations are very stimulating for people to see. I think
Good
that's,
point.
like political spectrums. There's lots of people who are very assertive, and I think you don't really get to that position without being assertive, without being really smart, and without demonstrating to the world that you got your shit together, and you're blazing a trail, and you can be a leader. Leaders are often low in agreeableness, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Um, but having a conversation with two people that are really high in openness, or high in agreeableness too, maybe let's stick with agreeableness, because of course I'm kind of spitballing. I don't know all the facts on this, but um, having two conversations with people who are high in agreeableness, it's almost like both of them are trying to appease the other person, and the conversation can get just really wishy-washy and awkward, and kind of lost in space, and there's kind of no direction. And of course, if you're having there's a reason that I said that, and I'm kind of starting to forget the reason that I was saying that. We were talking about listening.
I'm listening.
So the format, yeah, okay. So the format that you mentioned was like listening, um, coming to an endpoint, which now is starting to happen in my mind, and then posing a question about how that person feels. Um, is that uh, shoot? So I failed. I was going to try and formulate
I love
something
that.
else, and of course I'm high in openness, and I've failed to come to a point. And that's often, maybe that's an issue that I have, and maybe that's something that I can get better at, is that often I'll have something to say about it, but it won't be a directional thing to say.
Hmm.
How do you get better at that?
Practice is, I think, the only thing. I'm going to connect it to the podcast with Elon Musk and the way that he described communication. Uh, it was within the context of this whole idea of a neural linking thing that's essentially going to give us the ability to read each other's mind. But that being said, yeah, of course, your eyes went boop. You're like, what? Oh my God. But, anyways, what he's talking about is just the base language that we have right now is there's this thought in my head, and then I have to decompress that thought and then formulate words to try and make it match what's going on. So that's a place in the conversation where errors are going to occur, and that you're never going to say exactly what you truly mean or what you truly feel. And then, of course, all of that data streams across to the listener. And then the listener has an opportunity to bring in all of that data, and they're doing the opposite, but the same process of compressing or decompressing essentially all of those words and trying to match it up with how they're hearing it. Something I noticed, since we've been doing this, I will go back and I'll listen to them on double speed, of course, and I will find these errors of like, wait a second, did I say that word? I guess I did say that word. There was one time when you asked me a question. I think was the first long one that we did. I was talking about the water in the harbor and the color of the water. And then
Mm.
you asked me a follow up question about that color. And then I realized, oh, okay, he was asking me about the color of the water in a different way than I was thinking about the color of the water. And I didn't even realize in that moment that I had used the word color to describe it. So you had asked me a question where I was slightly confused because, like, okay, he's asking me a question about me mentioning the color of the water, but I don't really remember talking about the color of the water. So
Okay.
things get missed along the way. And, human conversations are, are always going to be a certain level of imperfect. And maybe that's a great place for me to launch on to what is my favorite subject lately is those the Bakersfield doctors, the Bakersfield doctors, because what I think is actually going on with those guys is just a massive miscommunication on so many levels.
Hmm.
Um, they come out with their findings, and they try to say we're emergency room doctors. We have some data that we would like to offer to those who calculate data. And when you try to say, yes, we're not experts in epidemiology, we're not experts in statistics, we're not experts in these things, everyone automatically assumes, based on the way they've said it, that they are proclaiming that they're experts in epidemiology and statistics and all that. Um, but what they were actually saying is here's a bunch of data we have. And their main point was actually about here's the emergency room things in our practice that we feel should be considered when moving forward. So it's really careful. How do you present your information? Because it can easily be torn apart and become something different. Um, and I put up the picture. So you can see Dr. Erickson there. He's an expert as an emergency doctor.
Mm-hmm.
He's not an expert at being on camera and talking.
Mm.
And I wonder when I look at that face, what role does that face play when he is emotional about making a point? Because I think in all of the videos, you get a certain emotion from him of like, why the hell are people not understanding my point? Why why are people not listening to what I have to say? And why are they accusing me of having some sort of secretive agenda? And then all of that gets squished up into his face. And I look at that face and I go, yeah, definitely. There are some people who watch that video and they got an impression of angry, mean man, and that he must have some sort of agenda because all of these things are relevant. Body language is extremely relevant, and on camera communication uh, picks up everything. And there are things that people do that they're not aware of, but they do convey a lot of meaning to almost every viewer or listener, and they convey different meanings to different people. So all of this mass communication, we're figuring out how the hell to understand each other better,
Mm-hmm.
what we actually mean, and we rarely give each other enough time to actually focus and just take the time to be clear. And what is clarity to begin with? What
Mm-hmm.
are you saying? It's almost as if the question that journalists or truth seekers want to rehearse over and over again is simple questions like, tell me more about that. Um, and can you explain a little bit more of this? And directly grab something that they just said. Tell me a little bit more of that. Rather than moving on to, here's my list of gotcha questions
Mm.
or things that are provocative, that are going to be of interest to my YouTube audience. The last video I made, um, just this morning was about an interview with these two guys, and I picked through the questions. And
Hmm.
it was the questions. It's like, okay, the first question was just a softball. Tell us your story, and say, so, well, we've gathered some data, blah, 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 blah. But then the second question is, why did YouTube take down your video? Um, I don't know. I don't know YouTube's policies. Da 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 da. The next question about are people accusing you of being a conspiracy theorist? I don't know. I'm not them. And so the doctors are then put in a position to have to roll back and say, look, I don't know anything about YouTube. What I'm trying to focus on is the stories that I am encountering in my own practice with my own patients and in conversations with other emergency room doctors. And yes, he's an expert at being an emergency room doctor. And then anytime he opens his mouth about it's possible that based on the data we have, maybe, see, these are important words, possible, maybe
Hmm.
that the fatality rate is lower. But those words almost immediately get deleted from the conversation. We don't give a shit if you said possibly. We don't give a shit if you said maybe. We don't care if you prefaced your statement by saying, look, I'm not an epidemiologist, and I'm not an expert. You can say that whole sentence and it will get deleted. Both literally and figuratively. Like, you can get someone who just clips their video, deleting out the sentence that says, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm thinking that there might be a possibility of, see how many times you have to downgrade it. And then
Hmm.
all of that gets lost. And all of a sudden, um, it's no one's talking about uh, the data that they brought to the table.
Yeah. So
Um,
so you focused a lot on what questions were being asked.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Man,
yeah.
that's an
And
awesome point.
well, yeah, because well, thanks. I think most people don't have the skills to be able to ask good questions, in particular of scientists.
Do you mean to ask good questions, or to you mean like being asked those questions, like answering those questions? Because I was always under the impression that scientists are the people who should be asking the best questions.
That's a great thought. They probably should be the ones asking more questions. When they're put in front of the media, though, what is the expertise of people in the media?
Mm.
Very little about how to ask a really appropriate question about what they do.
Mm.
Um, that's kind of not in our vocabulary, and it certainly is not going to bring you any hits on the internet.
Yeah.
You want to ask about the gossip. The gossip that surrounds your story is what's going to sell more newspapers, even though it's not really newspapers anymore.
Hmm. So then,
Yeah,
can you answer this question?
I'll try
It
my
seems
best.
okay. There's some people that are really starting to enjoy long form media, long form YouTube videos and podcasts and things like that. But there's still this other side of things being like people want the instant gratification of like, I think this way, and so this video appeals to me, and screw you to all these people. Here's evidence of blah blah blah. Sound bites and things like that. Do you see a shift in what's happening right now in people's attention, and or do you think there's a shift in the attention of people where they want to see long form, or do you think it's still in that soundbite world where people are still being manipulated, or still being using the information to suit their own needs? And also, do you think it has anything to do with personality temperament? Um, People who are, or personality temperament, or something like IQ. Maybe we shouldn't use IQ, but level
Hmm.
of insight. Maybe that's a better, like, people who have better self insight, do they gravitate more towards long form where they can actually see what's going on, and then people who have lack of insight or even a different personality type, maybe they're um, more conscientious and lower in openness, maybe they are more gravitating towards, this is the thing that suits me, I'm going to go with that, and not have the self insight. Sorry, there's a lot packed into that question, kind of, but or
It was a bit of a big question, but let's try and unpack it.
okay,
Um, I'll start by sort of practicing what I preach and saying, I'm not an expert on studying people's sort of motivations on what they are listening to or consuming in terms of media and what it all gives them. What I'm saying is I'm in the realm of speculation now.
mm,
Um, Now I speculate though with I think a certain amount of uh, evidence or I don't know experience of the situation. Um, just by the fact that we are all users of social media. And I can see what grabs the attention and what doesn't grab the attention. And what does grab the attention can often be in quite short formats. And I think in particular, um, the very sort of basic formats of Facebook video blew up at a certain point, and especially the like autoplay videos. People would just grab those and instantaneously get essentially a confirmation bias of what they thought to be true. It's like, oh, great, there's a 35-second video that proves that Hillary is a criminal and we should lock her up, and it's that simple. And the algorithms all support that because they are designed to find the person that wants that confirmation bias.
mm,
And maybe that's the critical point in all of this is our system has led us towards tailoring the content that people uh, that the corporations want you to consume, or at least know you have a much higher chance of consuming. There really is no such thing as a sort of unbiased research of any particular subject because the corporations know something about every browser history,
mm.
and they're going to try to lead anyone to find the evidence that they need rather than the unbiased evidence that they might crave. Um, Now, I kind of went on a bunch of places with that. And have things changed for people wanting longer format? I just don't have enough information
Yeah.
uh, to know that. I hope it is. So maybe if I go to searching for it, I'll end up finding that, oh, yeah, people do want longer formats. And it'll confirm my bias or my hope that people want longer format material. But
Yeah, I have had this thought since we've been putting material for the public to view, if that the things that I'm talking about in these interviews, if I think that that's what everybody experiences, but maybe what's happening is that by me talking about it, I'm just exposing myself. I'm just exposing what I am viewing on the internet, viewing the clickbait, viewing all this stuff, and just basically saying, yeah, this stuff is bad. But then the reason that I'm saying it's bad because I know it's there is because I'm subject to it. So,
excellent point.
sometimes I was wondering
How do
if
you
I'm.
know what's bad and what's good? And um, I only know what's bad and what's good based on my years of experience of what's been told is bad and good. And actually, at this point, I've come to the conclusion that most things are not bad or good, and that the world is not black and white, and that 99.9% of the world is some shade of gray. And that discovery for me was really enlightening. Because now I can more easily consume any content with a much more open mind. If someone is very aggressively, use that word from what you used earlier, very aggressively claiming that they are right about something, and they're very assertive about conclusions, in particular conclusions that they may not be fully qualified for. Donald Trump is an excellent example of that. Every single subject under the sun, he's like, oh yeah, I know more than anybody. Oh, I'm an expert on that. I know, you have no idea how much I know about that. That was my terrible Donald Trump
That's like a mix
moment.
of Bernie Sanders and
It was a Bernie Trump. The Bernie Trump. Ah. Yeah, so yeah, Donald Trump he would just say it, boom, out of his mouth, like, nobody knows more than that than me. And I'm like, how? What makes you think that? But he's a classic narcissist that really has absolutely no idea that there are people who know a hell of a lot more than him about that. And I think, wow, I think he kind of believes a lot of that sometimes,
Hmm.
So
So
it's amazing.
you think he might actually have like narcissistic personality disorder, maybe?
Well, I'll practice what I preach again. I'm not a doctor.
Well,
However, I do know a lot about mental health. And it's really, really clear that he shows all of the major symptoms. You can look it up in the DSA. I think it's the DSD. Yeah. Anyways, the psychological big book. He-
DSM.
he- yeah, DSM. Thank you. Um, DSA. Oh yeah, yeah. Democratic Socialists of America. That's the DSM. Yeah, look it up in the DSM. He shows all the classic signs of being a narcissistic personality disorder, and also his life story
Hmm.
fits, that man. But also, hey, I'm not him. Um, but all of what we've talked about this whole episode so far does connect in the matter that um, he is exactly what American politics was leaning toward, whether it be Donald Trump or some other Trumpian like figure. They got exactly what their system was designed to eventually produce.
Right. Kind of like Nazi Germany.
I don't want to make that comparison.
So what you're
Um,
saying? Sorry.
no, no, and actually, I disagree with that. Actually, I talking about the style of communication and what gets rewarded in the political sphere
Hmm.
was leading towards a Donald Trump. Something that may be overlooked is in the states, like per population, their Congress is small. It's 400 some members of 435, I believe is the number, and then 100 senators. And compared to a country like Canada with 10% of the population, we have 300 some MPs and then about 100 senators. So like the ratio of population to elected official on the federal level is like way out of whack. And what does that lead to? It leads to money absolutely controlling the entire system, and their system never ends. We have an election every 4 to 5 years, and the campaign is like 2 to 3 months. Theirs is just this constant cycle of electioneering, because they know exactly when the date is going to be. So you're constantly out there raising money. In the United States, the day after you get elected, your Democratic Party or Republican Party leader is saying, hey, welcome to Washington. Here's the place where you make phone calls. to get money from our donors. And you're going to spend half of your day calling up donors, uh, raising money for the next election. And so the skills it takes to be that kind of politician, go back to what I said earlier, is to be a good socialite, to be able to smooze with people, to be a little bit greasy. So I'm getting more into the Donald Trump area. Be a little bit greasy, a little bit slimy, a little bit of a douchebag, a little bit of a con artist. All of these things go together. Narcissism is perfect to be a great politician because you can just say things as if they're true and with a lot of confidence, and you're a strong leader because you're just super like assertive about what you're saying. Like, I'm right about this, and this is awesome. You're like, man, I'm impressed with that guy. He must, he must be know what he's talking about. It's like, no,
Hmm.
he's got all those personality traits and skills learned through life to lead to there. And so that's why I say in the States, they've essentially gotten exactly what they want, both on that social skill level and also what they've done in policy.
Hmm.
Now, the policies that they have essentially for the last 40 years have essentially completely disregarded the American population. There's zero relationship to policy that the American population wants and what they get. There's really wonderful graph. It's a study done by Harvard where the policy positions that the American people want and what actually gets passed is essentially 0%. It's just a straight line right across the graph. There's a no matter what they want, whether it's a right wing policy, a left wing policy, a just random policy, they never get what they want. But then when you look at the policies that the donors want, that the big corporations who make all the donations to the political candidates and the policies that they fight for, then you see a line where it's like, well, they get, 60 to 70%
So
of it.
that's also in the study or in the
Yeah.
paper.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
essentially, yeah, it's essentially comparing whether or not the American government is a government for the people. And that's just simply has not been true for 40 years. And the entire population knows it. And
Mm.
so some of the population that knows it um, votes for a guy like Donald Trump because they think Donald Trump is going to change that. And so you can't blame some average people for voting for Donald Trump because what they were actually voting for was to blow up the system
Mm.
and try and change this, even though it was the absolute opposite. um, he's totally part of that, established system, and he's not going to change any fundamental thing. The,
Mm.
the the only fundamental thing um, is in politics actually is is taxes. That was just a warning, but we started late, so we can go another few minutes, I guess. Yeah, taxes. That's what it all comes down to. You think of any policy position that anyone has, it all comes down to the very simplistics of revenue and expenditure. And there's essentially one topic that they're just really never going to talk about, and that's taxes on rich people. It's okay to have taxes on the lower middle class. It's okay to have um, lottery tickets. That's a consumption tax on lower middle class people. Rich people don't buy them. It's a tax on poor people. Uh, Lower middle class people smoke cigarettes at a rate way higher than rich people. Partly, it's just presumed that they have more stress in their lives, and so a lot of them just can't kick the habit of smoking. And so we had these taxes on the smoking and on the alcohol, and then it's like, wait a second, we're taxing the lower middle class when we do that. So
Hmm. But you're talking about uh, behavior that has a choice. You could argue whether it's a choice or not, but just to play the devil's advocate, something
Sure.
like, sorry, did you mean like the tax, the actual tax on cigarettes, or do you mean like maybe I got that wrong? Actually, now that I
No,
think
you
about
didn't
it,
get it
but
wrong. And I think you brought up a great subject of choice. Um, it's also a choice to have taxes on cigarettes, additional taxes. There are additional taxes built into cigarettes. I'm talking from a Canadian perspective now. Additional taxes built into alcohol, additional taxes built into gasoline. So these are the big three that we tax the population. Yet, why is there not a yacht tax? So you can have an unlimited number of yachts. It's a luxury item. Um, you can have an unlimited number of them. There's no additional tax. You can fly literally around the world as many times as you want daily, but there's no additional tax on that. And of course, nobody can afford an unlimited number of yachts or vacations all around the world, except for the rich. So when we have these things that we've decided these are bad activities and these are not bad activities, that is a choice. That is the choice that we're going to tax those people as opposed to those people.
hmm.
And they reframe it as, well, the consumer has a choice to not do that. Well, yeah, that's also true. If we had a yacht tax, you will have the choice to buy one yacht or 25 yachts. That's your choice.
Hmm. Okay, so what are taxes for?
No, that's a massively huge question and a good question. All right, go through the simplest possible thing. Um, Taxes are to pay for our social uplift programs so that we all can get to a certain level starting point. So, general education, general health care. And so, we're all paying into this and accepting that we should all kind of take care of each other to a certain point.
Okay.
Um, the other option is, and this is unfortunately what we do, is we borrow money. And of course, this very simple yet interesting thing that a lot of people may forget about. When we borrow money, who do we borrow it from? We obviously borrow it from rich people. They are the people who lend governments money. So on one hand, we borrow from the rich, and then on the other hand, we take in taxes so that we can pay the rich for what we've borrowed. And then you think, well, why not, instead of this borrowing from the rich, let's tax the rich a little bit more. And then we don't have to borrow anything at all. And then we don't have to pay them for all this borrowed money.
Mm-hmm.
Because what the rich want is to basically have everyone in what's called like debt peonage. We are all in debt for the rich forever. And there's no jubilee. It's never going to wash away. Jubilee is an old term. It used to be something in societies where every 20 some years or 21 years or whatever it was in their culture, they would do a massive distribution of wealth in their communities. And everyone knew it was coming. And it was like, whatever, you did really well this 20 years, but then in their culture super happy to be like, great, now it's time to give some of it away and switch it all up, you know? But we don't do that kind of thing anymore.
How do we
But
decide? Sorry.
no, go.
How do
Ask.
we decide where the tax comes from? How did that start? Where did that come from?
Oh, taxes go back a long way. Um, I'm not
I
sure quite what you mean by where did it start?
like
We
yeah.
had to pay for wars.
Yeah. Like again, I like to I find history so important. And when I
Yeah,
keep going back in history, it helps me understand the present like
of
way more,
course.
and like context. I think that's a big theme that's been circulating or been popping up in our conversations. Is context is so important. And so I, when I was a kid, and for many things now, I feel like what's happened is I've been dropped into um, a society, and there's all these rules and regulations on this game, and I know that I have to play by the rules, but I don't necessarily know why. And sometimes knowing the why means going back in history. Um, so, okay, so, and like, it's not that I don't know what taxes are, but sometimes those questions are, so just to let everybody know, I'm coming up on 30 years old. I do know what taxes are,
Ah,
but that question in its basic form helps me to understand, and like where it came from is really um, helps me to understand. And then the second question, okay, so where did or what are taxes? And the second question that I've been thinking about, or just a few minutes in this conversation, is what gets taxed, and how do we decide what gets taxed? Is it like everything that has to do with money? Every time you spend, every time you sell or consume or bring in, uh, how do we figure out what gets taxed, or is it just
that's a
everything?
great question. It is up to us to decide.
Okay.
Taxation is a human idea, is a human solution to a human problem. As a community, some of the earliest needs were safety and defense. So the earliest needs and the earliest reasons for taxation was to pay soldiers and to build defenses. And that would often also include some simple infrastructure. You would be able to maybe build a canal, build an aqueduct, get some simple resources for your population. Water is important. Defense is important. Um, and there are just a long list of things that are important that perhaps we cannot leave to the randomness of human interaction to be able to successfully pull off.
Mm.
Having water might not be a thing where we trust in the invisible hand of the market. That's a phrase that you might want to familiarize yourself with. Um, it's philosophy of capitalism that somehow there's this invisible hand that if we just stay away from everything, somehow the free market will solve all problems. But yet, over and over again, we've had to come up with solutions where the community comes together and by either a way of taxation or voluntary contribution. Um, there's lots of places where it's like, yeah, we need an aqueduct, we need a road, and instead of taxing the population, you sell it to the population. Like, okay, we feel as though we need to have a bridge across the river so we can all do trade with those people over there. What does everyone think? Oh, I think it's a great idea. Okay, so here's the two ideas we have. We can either tax everyone, we'll come around once a month and everyone's got to pay one gold piece, or we can raise money voluntarily. And everyone's like, oh, okay, great. We don't want to pay voluntarily. All right, well, then you don't get a bridge. Oh, but we want a bridge. Okay, well, let's go back to the voluntarily part. And then so it's a way, it's public money put together to give us a base level of infrastructure to help everyone. And I put the emphasis on the things that are important. And this is where people make the mistake with someone like myself, um, thinking that I'm a socialist, where the public controls everything. It's like I'm definitely a democratic socialist, meaning I'm splitting things up into things that are extremely important that we can't just leave to this magical force to make it happen. So a thing like healthcare, I'm like, yeah, can we just leave that to entirely to the free market? What if it fucks up? What if something fucks up in such a way that they're just not able to run that business properly? And that is exactly what happened in the pandemic. Because in the early stages of the pandemic, everyone turned to their governments, said, why don't you have enough masks? Why don't you have enough protective equipment? Why don't you have a system in place? It's because the capitalist way of thinking doesn't do that. Yet a public system would always calculate on a scientific basis what are the chances of a deadly pandemic and what is the sort of a base need of protective equipment to have that's in stock. And so those kinds of calculations get made. But
Hmm.
I said a lot there. um,
Yeah, I have a number of ideas that sprouted from that.
well, taxation is a massive subject matter that no one talks about because the rich have very successfully, over a period of about 70 some years, made it a taboo subject. You're not really allowed to talk about taxation because the rich, their agenda is super clear. They do not want to pay taxes, or at least they don't want to pay huge sums of taxes. And on some level, you can see what they're saying is like eventually you're going to run out of their money if you just keep taxing more and more and more. And there is something to be said about that. We do need people to look at how much are we spending. And so they always point to the social programs like how much retirement money can we give each individual? How much can we give in employment insurance benefits for each person? And it's really hard to take away benefits. Once the benefits are in place, people feel entitled to those benefits. Yet the other side of it, of course, is um, people are also banking on those benefits and they're making decisions based on an assumption that there will be retirement money when I'm 65. But I'm also at the point now of like, I don't fucking think it's going to be there. I think when this whole pandemic is done, we're going to see a whole round of conservative minded politicians wanting to cut on all the program side. And all those program sides are actually supporting a lot of good activity in the economy. And if you only cut, you're doomed. Um, it has to be both. You have to both increase revenue or taxes and do some cutting on the other side if you want to balance the things out. And that's why I say, we need conservatives to reframe their arguments. I'm considering joining the Conservative Party to warn them. You've got to reframe your arguments because true lefties, they don't hear it that way. You're not making your point very well, and it makes lefties that much more dug into their position. And if you do want the left to overspend, you're doing exactly what will make that outcome happen, because they're just like, conservatives they just want to cut, and then the same is true on the opposite side. Conservatives look to the left and but all the left wants to do is spend, and they're like, oh god. It needs to be both, people. It needs to be both.
Hmm.
Anyways.
Wow. Well, I certainly learned a lot today.
Oh, good.
That
Is
was
that what
really
this is? I'm teaching?
uh not necessarily, but I came in with the mindset in these interviews that I'm gonna not shy away from asking questions that I have been wanting to know and wanting to ask, without the shame of
Hmm.
being wrong or not having the answer, or having
That's
the shame
impressive.
of asking the question, what what are taxes for, or what are taxes?
Hmm.
Um,
That's
yeah.
brave. I don't think there's enough people that are brave. And today, I was impressed at times when you're like, I might be wrong about that. And I think that takes a lot of courage, a courage that a lot of people just don't have. And I think we talked about that a lot today, of people who are so damn sure they're right, and it's so difficult for those people to admit when they're wrong. And I'll be honest, it's extremely difficult for me to admit when I'm wrong. It's not an easy thing to do.
Mm,
Doesn't feel good.
yeah. I liked what you said about the gray areas. It's not always black and white, and let we got to live in the gray areas, so to speak.
Yeah, reality is great.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Reality, yeah, living in actual reality. Yeah, yeah.
and it just made me think. Wow, the the expression the your gray matter is really use your gray matter. Yeah,
Mm,
realize we actually live in the gray zone.
mm.
All
Yeah.
right, shall we wrap it up?
Uh, yes, I shall have to wrap up. So, or I shall have to. So that means I guess we have to collectively.
Well, hopefully the people find that entertaining.
Yeah.
Are you entertained? My name is Darcy. I am on the east.
And I'm Marcus. I'm on the west.
We are
And
the West East Brotherhood. And I'm sticking with Brotherhood for now, even though I know there might be someone out there who's going to go, the Brotherhood, they're like Nazis.
yeah, I've been thinking about that, and I was like, oh man, what's gonna happen? Is
Oh
that
no, I can't wait for a bunch of crazy Nazis to come in and listen. And, you guys aren't talking about Nazi shit. That's some crazy ass socialism. I'm like, okay then. Oh, nice to see you. Actually, that is one of my biggest whys. Is I think people who when they get into deep dark places in their belief systems, we have to engage with those people. There's a reason, you know. We
mm,
have to assume they're not bad people. We have to assume that they had a certain life experience that drew them to a place where they started believing things that come from bad ideologies. And the way is to try and engage with them and try and bring them back and talk to them. There's some great, TED talks from former neo Nazis of like, wow, how they got out of it, and
mm,
it was, the deep emotional core of like, I was lost. I had no friends. I had no support, and I found friendship in the neo-Nazi movement. And
yeah,
see, now I've said that on the internet, so someone can take that little tiny clip, and then all of a sudden, Darcy's a Nazi.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, I'll do more research on that from a psychological perspective, because that is a really
cool.
interesting topic, and I've been
That's an
interested
excellent
in
topic.
the relationship between that and like cultism, for example,
Mm,
because neo-Nazism or Nazism, I suppose it's kind of cultish, right? And
definitely.
how do people get wrapped up into that?
Cool. I will look forward to those questions in our next session.
Cool.
All right. Have a good one. Leaving
Yep.
meeting. Kaboom!